of Assad second.
Well, I think Senator Sanders has just reinforced my point. Yes, when I was Secretary of State, I did urge, along with the Department of Defense and the CIA, that we seek out, vet, and train and arm Syrian opposition figures so that they could defend themselves against Assad. The president said no. Now, that's how it works. People who work for the president make recommendations, and then the president makes the decision. So I think it's only fair to look at where we are in Syria today. And yes, I do still support a no-fly zone because I think we need to put in safe havens for those poor Syrians who are fleeing both Assad and ISIS.
Let's stay on national security.
That they can be safe.
Staying on national security, Dana Bash has a question.
Senator Sanders, in 1997, you said this about NATO. You said, quote, "It is not the time to continue wasting tens of billions of dollars helping to defend Europe, let alone assuming more than our share of any costs associated with expanding NATO." Do you still feel that way?
Well, what I believe, if my memory is correct here, we spend about 75% of the entire cost of the military aspect of NATO. Given the fact that France has a very good healthcare system and free public education, college education for their people, the UK has a good national health service, and they also provide fairly reasonable higher education. You know what? Yeah, I do believe that the countries of Europe should pick up more of the burden for their defense. Yes, I do.
And just following up, Senator Sanders, Donald Trump also argues that NATO is unfair economically to the U.S. because America pays a disproportionate share. So how is what you say about NATO and your proposal different than his?
Well, you got to ask Trump. All I can tell you is with a huge deficit, with 47 million people living in poverty, with our inner cities collapsing, yeah, I do think countries like Germany and UK and France and European countries whose economy, or at least its standard of living and healthcare and education, they're doing pretty well. So I would not be embarrassed as President of the United States to say to our European allies, you know what? The United States of America cannot just support your economies. You got to put up your own fair share of the defense burden. Nothing wrong with that.
Secretary Clinton.
I support our continuing involvement in NATO, and it is important to ask for our NATO allies to pay more of the cost. There is a requirement that they should be doing so, and I believe that needs to be enforced. But there's a larger question here. NATO has been the most successful military alliance in probably human history. It has bound together across the Atlantic countries that are democracies, that have many of the same values and interests. And now we need to modernize it and move it into the 21st century to serve as that head of our defense operations in Europe when it comes to terrorism and other threats that we face.
Madam
So,
Secretary,
yes, of course they should be paying more, but that doesn't mean if they don't, we leave, because I don't think that's in America's interest.
That's going to be part of my question to you is, to that point, there are 28 countries in the alliance, and the United States gives more money to NATO's budget than 21 of those countries combined. If they don't agree to pay more, as you suggested, then what would you do as Commander-in-Chief?
I will stay in NATO. I will stay in NATO, and we will continue to look for missions and other kinds of programs that they will support. Remember, NATO was with us in Afghanistan. Most of the member countries also lost soldiers and civilians in Afghanistan. They came to our rallying defense after 9/11. That meant a lot. And yes, we have to work out the financial aspects of it, but let's not forget what's really happening. With Russia being more aggressive, making all kinds of intimidating moves toward the Baltic countries. We've seen what they've done in eastern Ukraine. We know how they want to rewrite the map of Europe. It is not in our interest. Think of how much it would cost if Russia's aggression were not deterred because NATO was there on the front lines, making it clear they could not move forward.
Senator, let's talk about the U.S. relationship with Israel. Senator Sanders, you maintain that Israel's response in Gaza in 2014 was, quote, disproportionate and led to the unnecessary loss of innocent life. What do you say to those who believe that Israel has a right to defend itself as it sees fit?
Well, as somebody who spent many months of my life when I was a kid in Israel, who has family in Israel, of course Israel has a right not only to defend themselves, but to live in peace and security without fear of terrorist attack. That is not a debate. But what you just read, yeah, I do believe that. Israel was subjected to terrorist attacks, has every right in the world to destroy terrorism. But we had in the Gaza area, not a very large area, some 10,000 civilians who were wounded and some 1,500 who were killed. Now, if you're asking me, not just me, but countries all over the world, was that a disproportionate attack? The answer is, I believe it was. And let me say something else. As somebody who is 100% pro-Israel, in the long run, and this is not going to be easy, God only knows, but in the long run, if we are ever going to bring peace to that region which has seen so much hatred and so much war, we are going to have to treat the Palestinian people with respect and dignity. So one is not to say that right now in Gaza, unemployment is somewhere around 40%. You got a lot of that area continuous. It hasn't been rebuilt. Decimated, houses decimated, healthcare decimated, schools decimated. I believe the United States and the rest of the world have got to work together to help the Palestinian people. That does not make me anti-Israel. That paves the way, I think,
Thank you, Senator.
for an approach that works in the Middle East.
Thank you. Secretary Clinton.